Welcome to our History of Organic Farming module.
This module was authored by Christine Moncada, Constance Carlson, Jim Riddle, Carmen Fernholz, and Craig Schieffer of the University of Minnesota in 2017 and updated in 2026. Narrated by Constance Carlson, with additional narration generated using the AI voice of Hannah from ElevenLabs.
The National Organic Program, or known as NOP, and the USDA Certified Organic Seal were established in 2002. However, organic methods and the organic movement have a rich history that began many years before. We will first discuss the changes in agriculture that eventually led to the organic movement. To understand why the organic movement started, we need to understand farming practices in the early part of the 20th century. Prior to the 1920s, most agriculture could be considered organic by today's standards. Pest and weed management was handled mostly through manual labor, and most farms had livestock for manure, which provided the main source of nutrients for crops. After the 1920s, and especially post-World War II, agriculture started becoming industrialized. It was a time of great change, where farms were becoming more mechanized and specialized, and synthetic chemicals were more prevalent. For example, in 1952, about 10% of corn acres were treated with herbicides. By 1982, just 30 years later, nearly 95% of corn acreage had herbicide applied. Before the availability of inexpensive synthetic nitrogen fertilizers, farmers were more dependent on crop rotations and manures for fertility. After 1960, there was a dramatic increase in the amount of fertilizer applied to fields, particularly synthetic nitrogen. Organic farming, as we know it, has its roots in a movement within Europe that occurred in the 1920s to the 1950s. This movement was in response to the industrialization of agriculture, particularly the growing use of synthetic nitrogen inputs and pesticides. Most farmers in this movement had diverse operations that included livestock, poultry, vegetable, and grain production. The movement began an emphasis on soil health that is still present today in organic farming. Here's a brief review of some of the influential people in the early organic movement. Sir Elbert Howard, an Englishman, is commonly regarded as the father of organic agriculture. Important concepts were developed then that are still important today. There was a concentration on the connection of healthy soils to plant and animal health, and the importance of humus, which is the organic component of soil. Interestingly enough, he never used the term organic. The first use of the term organic came from Lord Northbourne, also an Englishman, in 1939. Lord Northbourne believed that the farm should be managed as an organic whole. This is where the concept of holistic management comes from in organic agriculture. Now that we have learned a little about events that were happening in Europe, we will move to the effect they had in the United States. J.I. Rodale was inspired by the thinkers and the organic movement of Europe. He introduced organic farming concepts to the American public. He founded the Soil and Health Foundation, which eventually became the Rodale Institute. The Rodale Institute is still highly influential to organic farmers and gardeners today. Those with interest in organic food and agriculture had concerns with many issues with the trends of agriculture at the time. They were troubled by the ill effects of pesticides, declines in soil health, water pollution, the costs of synthetic inputs like fertilizers and pesticides, and the loss of family farms and local markets. Many of these concerns still hold true today. What was organic like in the early days? Many of the decision-making groups we know today, such as the National Organic Program, hadn't been formed yet. Organic production and awareness was a grassroots effort that occurred at the local level, where people knew their farmers and trusted that organic practices were being followed. Organic farmers acquired information from each other and organizations, such as the Rodale Institute. Producers, for the most part, did not receive an organic premium in these days. They had ethical motivations to be organic rather than financial. Grain producers, for instance, sold in the conventional markets. Demand for organic food was rising, so different groups of farmers and consumers cooperated to develop their own organic standards and certification processes. However, they were not necessarily consistent from state to state. There was no national organic standard. In her book, Turn Here Sweet Corn, Atina Diffley, an organic farmer and advocate, describes what organic farming was like in those early days. Organic farmers were working out systems on their own farms. Often they were isolated and faced harassment and ridicule in their own communities. Two of the greatest challenges at the time were lack of growing information and confusion about what organic meant. The 1980s were important to the development of organic as we know it today. The organic movement started to be defined by state governments. Oregon, Maine, and California had legal definitions of organic by 1980. In the upper Midwest, the Organic Growers and Buyers Association worked with the state of Minnesota to pass organic rules and regulations in 1985. Just like today, organic producers in the mid-1980s obtained certification through private or state agencies. By this time, organic producers had many certifying agencies from which to choose. Private agencies were governed by their own members who developed their own rules to define organic. Not only did different states have different organic standards, so did different certification agencies in places without statewide regulation. For instance, unlike today, some places allowed synthetic pesticides to be used sparingly or as a last resort. Some allowed synthetic fertilizer urea to be used. Today, it takes 3 years without the use of prohibited materials for land to be certified. But back then, the transition period was often 12 months, which some thought too long and others not long enough. Because of the lack of consistent standards, marketing organic products was more difficult. Consumers couldn't be sure which methods were being used. Because prices for organics were increasing, people were worried that this would incentivize cheaters to use organic labels without organic methods. The irregularities of the organic system needed to be addressed. This is the time when the USDA became involved. These inconsistent standards led the organic industry to petition the USDA to regulate organic agriculture. As a result, Congress passed the Organic Foods Production Act of 1990. The goal of the Organic Foods Production Act was for organic to become a marketing term. This may seem counterintuitive to the grassroots foundation of the organic movement, but uniform standards would allow consumers to be assured of the integrity of organic. The Organic Foods Production Act did several things. It mandated that the USDA develop national organic standards so that everyone in the country would be following the same rules. It made it illegal to use the term organic unless the standards were met. This was important so that enforcement could be done in cases of cheating. It also required certification by a state or independent certifier accredited by the USDA. However, The USDA would not be alone in determining organic standards. The National Organic Standards Board was formed to advise the USDA. This board is composed of volunteer citizen advisors who can be organic farmers, processors, retailers, scientists, environmentalists, advocates, and certifying agents. The process to develop national organic standards went on much longer than anticipated. The USDA's first attempt at defining organic wasn't until 1997. Unfortunately, it was met with outrage from the organic community. The recommendations followed some of the recommendations of the NOSB, but included irradiation, sewage sludge, synthetic pesticides, and genetically modified organisms. Jim Riddle, an organic farmer and advocate from Minnesota, had this to say about that time. In 1997, when the USDA issued the first proposed organic rule, it did not reflect organic standards. They also ignored the recommendations of their National Organic Standards Board. I did an in-depth critique of the proposed rule, which informed the rest of the organic community. It inspired 275,000 comments to be submitted about the proposed rule, which set a new record at the time. Luckily, the USDA withdrew that proposed rule. With modifications, the USDA's second attempt at establishing organic regulations was a success. While some changes have happened along the way, these are the same rules we have today. Please watch the What is Organic module for more information. By 2002, producers were using the USDA Certified Organic seal. So what is the status of organic today? Since the Organic Foods Production Act, the number of certified organic acres in the United States has been trending upward. Consumers depend on the USDA organic label as a reliable source for food grown under organic production practices. Since the National Organic Program was instituted, the market for organic foods has been trending upward. Here is how much funding the last 3 Farm Acts devoted to organic agriculture. This includes support for organic research, organic agriculture data collection, and the Organic Cost Share Program. As you can see, each successive act increased funding, which demonstrates the commitment our country has for organic. Where will organics go in the next 5, 10, or 20 years? The history of organic agriculture has shown us that advances in organics have always been driven by the farmers and consumers who strive for an agricultural system that feeds both the land and the community. The future of organics, then, is up to all of us. Carmen Fernholz, a longtime organic farmer from Minnesota, has this to say.
In the end, each of us is involved in the history of agriculture because each of us is an eater and each of us is an organism of this earth. As eaters, we will define and determine the history of agriculture as we drive our cars, as we shop the grocery aisles, as we eat at the local restaurants, as we buy our clothes. And as long as we are eating, we are creating the history of agriculture.
We have now completed the History of Organic module.
This project is supported by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, National Institute of Food and Agriculture, Organic Transitions Program under Award Number 2013-5, 1106-2-1005. This project is supported by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Agricultural Marketing Service, National Organic Program under the Transition to Organic Partnership Program, TOPP, in the Midwest region. Any opinions, findings, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in this publication are those of the authors and should not be construed to represent any official USDA or U.S. government determination or policy. The University of Minnesota shall provide equal access to and opportunity in its programs, facilities, and employment without regard to race, color, creed, religion, national origin, gender, age, marital status, familial status, disability, public assistance status, membership or activity in a local commission created for the purpose of dealing with discrimination, veteran status, sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression. For more information about this project, please see organicag.umn.edu, copyright 2026, Regents of the University of Minnesota. All rights reserved.